Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Legacy of Love Heart to Table webinar. This is our second one since we started a little less than a year ago, so we're very excited. For those of you who do not know, the Legacy of Love is the newest arm to the Jewish Fertility Foundation, which was created for hopeful and current grandparents of those experiencing infertility to gain tips and tools from professionals and veterans while learning how to support someone experiencing infertility. So, which is why you are all here this evening. A few housekeeping items that I want to go over before we start. This webinar is being recorded, so if anything is missed, or if you have friends that wanted to attend, or you want to forward something along, you will have the opportunity to go back and watch it and to forward anything you need. You will only be able to see the panel of speakers and none of the attendees. All participants will be anonymous and muted. In addition to any questions you may have at the end, those will also be anonymous. You'll ask in the Q&A. I'll get to that in a second, actually. I'll be sending high-level notes with information discussed and learned this evening. We're very lucky to have a wonderful JFF friend and professional, Shelley Gaines, who will be moderating for us this evening. And like I was saying before, if you do have any questions for our speakers at the end, please send them in the Q&A and we will get them answered. I also wanted to introduce our partner this evening, the Jewish Grandparents Network. They are a national organization that educates, connects, and supports grandparents as essential partners in enriching Jewish life. So with all of that being said, I would like to start off by opening it to and introducing my friend, Ilana Frank, who is the CEO and founder of the Jewish Fertility Foundation.
Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you for organizing tonight. It's huge. Kudos to you, seriously, for bringing people together for us to be able to learn. I always think back to when I was going through my infertility journey, and my mom always used to remind me that she was going through something as well. During her mahjong games, she wasn't able to share photos of babies. She wasn't able to talk about what I was going through, and it was really challenging for her as well. And she also wanted to figure out how to support me. So I wish that we had a program like ours back then, in addition to educational evenings like today, but also the Fertility Buddies program, where we match up intended grandparents with people who are now on the other side. So if anybody is interested, please reach out to Allison. I'd love to share very quickly a little bit about my journey. I have three kids born from various treatments. Two of them were born in Israel via IVF. It was exhausting. It was lonely. It was stressful. And then I came back to America with two little babies and was able to talk about what I went through a little bit easier. Went on for an additional 5 years trying to adopt. P.S. It's not easy to just adopt. And was very, very lucky to be able to receive two donated embryos from an amazing single mom by choice who helped us complete our family. So I'll share a little bit about the stats within the Jewish community. Um, and again, for those of you who are new to JFF, like Allison said, we help engage hopeful parents in three major ways across 10 communities nationally, and then also via the World Wide Web, like we are doing today, educationally and through our mental health services. Within the Jewish community, the numbers might be a little bit higher. I see Dr. Roberts here. We have a lot of genetic issues. We're an educated population. 1 in 5 individuals in the US are experiencing infertility, 1 in 6 globally. And you can see it increases as we get a little bit older. We're really proud of the work that we've done and are continuing to do at JFF. It is, a measure to track babies on the way, but the journey is really complex and hard, and we are here to support you, supporting your loved ones. So we all have a lot of work to do. And I know that it's really fun for us when we're able to support specific, I guess, groups of people. Erica and I, who you're going to hear from a little bit later, is one of my favorite single moms by choice. And we had some fun putting together some of these numbers. I know we're going to talk about single moms by choice, so I just wanted to kind of share with you some stats. So, within our organization, we're seeing some trends. Single moms by choice, we've got in some of our communities a really great group of people who lean on one another. And also, we have some single dads by choice who have joined our community as well via gestational carriers or surrogates. So 54% of sperm bank recipients are single moms by choice. It sounds obvious, but an interesting fact. Average age of single moms by choice. Sometimes they come to us in the later years and they need some assistance with egg or embryo or sperm donation. Well, everybody needs sperm donation. And what I thought was really great is that 90% of these single moms by choice do have a support system. And we're also really happy that JFF partakes in that as well. So I like this number, 98.8% express no regrets in their choice. I'd be curious about the others, but I know from personal experience through my son's donor, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. So kudos. I'm going to now turn it over to my friend, Shelly. She is a past board chair, an awesome coach and mentor, a grandmother, and a friend. Enjoy. You're on mute.
Okay, that's always like one of those that you got to just get with it. Love the graphics. Thank you so much. And guess what? Erica's going to go first, but I'm excited to be moderating tonight. It's going to be a great conversation. We've got great panelists that are going to give good insights, some personal stories, and some tips and advice on how to walk with grace and, manage and support your loved ones during the fertility journey. So Allison already told you a little bit about how we're going to do this, but just a quick reminder, I'm going to introduce our panelists one at a time. Afterwards, they're going to give their presentation on the topic that they've been assigned or chosen. And during those conversations or their presentations, feel free to take notes, jot down your thoughts, and most importantly, capture a question or two that you might want to ask them. Please put your questions in the Q&A for the webinar because after all four panelists speak, we will then open it up to the floor and I'll be presenting the questions and Jenny Jones will, or Allison, one of us on the JFF staff will be helping to fuel and seed those questions. So let's go ahead and get started because I know everyone is anxious to hear from the panelists. I'm going to start with Erica Schmidt, who is a single mom by choice and based in Pittsburgh. Let me tell you a little bit about Erica. I am going to read everybody's bio, and you all can hear me, I hope. Erica is a recipient parent and the proud single mom by choice of a 7-year-old daughter who is sperm donor conceived. Since having her daughter, she has become active in the Single Mothers by Choice national organization where she served as a chapter lead for the Pittsburgh chapter. Additionally, she was integral in starting up Jewish Fertility Foundation in Pittsburgh and serving as chair of their local advisory council upon initiation. Erica also has incorporated her experience of going through fertility treatment, parenting as a solo parent, and postpartum into her current work. She serves as Director of Counseling and Family Support Services at the Children's Home of Pittsburgh, overseeing all functions of the adoption program, counseling services, and medical social work services. And she also provides direct counseling services to those experiencing infertility, those using assisted and third-party reproduction, and the area of perinatal mental health. She's skilled as a family therapist, a family trainer, infertility support group facilitator and presenter at local, state, and national conferences. She's very passionate about education and advocacy for infertility and third-party reproduction and is part of the ASRM, mental health professional groups, and more. So, without further ado, Erica, unmute and take it away.
All right. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of my story and my journey to become a single parent by choice. I always knew I wanted to be a parent, like from a very young age. That was always in my plans. I did not know I was going to do it myself, did not plan on doing it myself, but being a mom was always something that was part of my future outlook from a young age. Um, Keeping all details out of this, like I spent a lot of years like working on my career, like focused on dating later than a lot of other people. And when the long-term relationship that I had hoped for didn't quite work out in the manner I had wanted, I started to shift a little bit of thinking. And I had actually joked around with a couple of friends starting in my early 30s of like, I guess if it doesn't work for me with a partner, by the time I'm 35, I'll just try to do it solo. But I didn't actually look into it, and nor did I actually think that would be where I'd land, but I did toss it around because by that point my friends were starting to have kids, and I knew that that's where I want to go, and I had sort of mentioned it in passing, but I didn't get there until I was probably close to 35, and then I had made the decision, not being in a relationship, that I wanted to pursue parenthood myself. And I started out by going to the reproductive endocrinology clinic, getting all my testing done, and being cleared to go ahead with IUI via sperm donor. So it was at that point when I started to share with my family, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I did not share with my family until I had that all clear from the fertility clinic that I would be a good to go. I didn't want to get anybody's hopes up, and I waited on it until that point. So like I said, I used donor sperm. It was important to me to find a sperm that was sperm donor that was open, so my child is able to have contact upon turning 18 if she desires. And I got pregnant on my fourth IUI after actually having to change donors partway through the process. So like any other infertility journey, and for me, it wasn't classic infertility. Sometimes people say social infertility, but it still took 4 tries to conceive, and a lot of different steps and changes along the way through the clinic. And like Shelly said, I have an absolutely awesome 7-year-old daughter named Hadley today, and we really enjoy our life, and I very much enjoy being a mother. I am definitely one of that 98.8% that has not one regret over my decision. It is hard, extremely hard at times. There's not a moment where I regret it. I think it's the best thing I ever chose to do. And I don't see that changing at any point. And I feel like I've also gained a lot in my world from making this choice. I have connected and made wonderful friends through the Single Mom by Choice community. I have changed my career and the paths I'm going in to include some of the infertility and third-party reproduction into my work. We've made surprising and amazing connections with my daughter's donor siblings. I never anticipated we'd be doing 2 times a year vacations with donor siblings, but that is what we do. We do 2 times a year get-togethers, and it means as much to me as it means to my daughter. Like, I always thought it would be there as an option for her, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the relationships, watching the other kids grow up, sharing medical information, all the things that come from that. So I know that this is a group for prospective, intended, or current grandparents. And so I need to share a little bit about my parents and my journey with their experience. My parents were extremely supportive. Again, I didn't clue them in until I got the all clear from the fertility clinic. I did at that point tell them what I was planning on. I needed my mom's buy-in. I work a job that has in social work that requires evening and weekend work. There's really no way around that with my career. I didn't want to switch jobs. I liked where I was at. I needed someone I could rely on for childcare off hours. I got my parents on board pretty quickly with the plan, with questions, particularly regarding the donor conception. Lots of questions, but they were on board very, very fast. I did keep them looped in to all the initial steps. We had a funny moment on vacation the summer before I tried to conceive. where I showed them my top three donors, like both my parents and my sister, and my brother-in-law, and I showed them the top three donors I was considering and shared my pro and con list. And they were very good. They didn't say a ton. They listened. They gave a little bit of input or asked a few questions. But I did try to loop them in all the way up until that choice of this is the donor I selected. And then I stopped updating them because when I started to actually try, I didn't want to have to deal with my parents' emotions on top of my own when things maybe didn't work. So I didn't share a lot and I had told them I wasn't going to. So from the time I started to try to conceive until the time I announced a pregnancy at 10 weeks along, I didn't share anything with them. My mom asked me one time, and I can only imagine how hard it was for her to not ask sooner than that, because we're a very tight family and we talk a lot. I talk to them several times a day some days. So like to not ask would have been challenging. But she asked one time, and that was only because she was trying to time her retirement around me having a baby. So she was like, "Is there any update on what's happening? Should I move forward with this?" And that was really helpful. The fact that they weren't, and my parents, if you don't know them, but if you knew them, they ask a lot of questions on a daily basis. Like, so the fact that they were respectful and didn't ask was very, very much appreciated. And then again, I did tell them when I was 10 weeks. At that point, when I knew baby was healthy, genetic test came back clear. So I would say in terms of what helped me the most from my parents' perspective was that they didn't really ask me a lot. They let me guide the conversation. They didn't push. Like, I knew my mom wanted to be included in things. I did bring her to one ultrasound. I brought my sister to the other. I took her shopping with me. Like, I involved her in a lot, and I knew she wanted that, but she didn't push. I made the decision to not have her in the delivery room, to have my sister in the delivery room. Again, I would bet if you asked her, she was disappointed with how that played out, but never said anything, like respected the choice I made. Again, when I reflect back, I'm very appreciative of how she handled it because I am very aware of how hard it would have been for her going through this process also. And having a child doing this solo and wanting to support. And really at this point in time, you know, my parents are like an extension of my daughter's nuclear family. When she draws pictures in school, you know, they say you can always tell like what a kid thinks of their family and like kind of insight when they're drawing. She draws like her, me, our two cats, and both my parents. So like for her, that's her family. They do not live with us. She sees them like 3, 4 times a week. But they are her immediate family. And that has been a blessing for me because it has allowed me to do this with a huge level of support. Um, the only thing I will say that has been challenging that, you know, sort of a kind of thing to watch is like on occasion, like I do think that grandparents tend to their anxiety seeps onto their kids at times, so they're anxious with how things are going. My parents, the only area they've had some real anxiety with was my connection with the donor siblings and wondering how my daughter would handle that and not really fully understanding the choices I've made in maintaining those strong connections. They've accepted it, but that's been a point for them that's been a little hard. So I think at times there's been moments where we cross some lines where it's like, I would have rather not had that discussion or they didn't put their feelings on that on me. Like I have to make my own decision on that. And I think also it's very hard when you're in a relationship with people and they're close to you that they don't butt in on at times when something feels like it wouldn't be how they would do it or they'd question that as parents. So I don't have a lot of complaints about that. The only other thing I was going to mention real quick, and I think I'm probably close to my time here, is that I will say like there is a level sometimes people don't know of grief that goes with being a single parent by choice. So when you think of fertility treatment, there's the obvious that everybody goes through, right? There's IUIs that fail, there's IVF that fails, there's disappointments, there's wait times, there's lots of unknowns. We're all going through that, whether it's single mom by choice or any other person trying to build a family in any way. The other piece that happens for single parents by choice is that you grieve not doing it with a partner. So I think part of my initial processing and something that I maybe wish my parents understood better, I'm not sure they did going through it. I don't think I talked about it a lot, was that you do grieve doing it with someone else. There's a grieving process. And so I didn't utilize my parents for support during that process. I utilized my best friend and therapy. So, the whatever you need to use to get through that. But just I think it is helpful if anyone does have a child that's looking at becoming a solo parent by choice to be cognizant of the fact that there is a grieving process. Even though you're doing something amazing and exciting, it's still not always in the way that you intended it to be. Now, I have met solo parents by choice that did want to take that path, but I think for many of us, it was not the first path we would have taken. Just like anyone going through fertility treatment, it wasn't the first path you would have taken to conceive either. So I think that's where I'm going to end.
All right, Erica. Wow. Thank you so much. You really gave some insights, some raw emotions. I think it was really great, your presentation about being a single mom by choice, and actually gave me a lot to think about as well. So we're going to move to Italy, where Melissa Wittenberg is calling in, who normally resides in Denver. She's going to talk about her surrogacy journey. Let me tell you a little bit about Melissa. And thank you for calling in late at 1 in the morning. Melissa and her husband live in Denver, Colorado, and have been on their fertility journey for years, having experienced 2 second trimester losses, intrauterine insemination, and surrogacy. They have 2 boys, one from IUI, and are expecting their third via surrogacy this summer. In addition to fundraising for multiple Jewish organizations, Melissa serves on the board of Colorado Jewish Action Alliance and is on JFF's Surrogacy Task Force. Melissa is also a dating and relationship coach who focuses on helping high-achieving women find and sustain fulfilling relationships. Thank you, Melissa. Let's hear from you next.
Hi, everybody. Like I said in my intro, my husband and I have been on our fertility journey for a while. Actually, it started before I even met my husband when I was 34, and I decided to freeze my eggs. And I did that, in case you're wondering, because I wanted the freedom to sort of make the best decisions for my life at the time, instead of this like imaginary future, which I didn't know if I'd ever get, but I heard this like ticking clock all the time. And so I made the decision to just move that piece out and really focus on like what made me happy, which led to me a month later starting to date my husband. When we started trying to have kids, the first time I got pregnant really easily. And then in the second trimester, we found out that the baby had Downs. And then a couple weeks later, I lost the baby. And I called my reproductive endocrinologist and I asked her like if she thought that there was a chance that that could happen again. I didn't really know so much about like the genetics, how it played out and how the chromosomes were affected. She told me about it. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, you know, Melissa, I always like to just look at a uterus after a loss to make sure there's no scar tissue that would keep you from getting pregnant again. So I said, okay, great. I went in and she said, so you still have the placenta here. And we need to take that out immediately because you could lose your uterus. And so I had to have the surgery to do that. And then it took a little while to start trying again until it was safe to. And somehow I, again, very easily got pregnant with the child that I now have, my 4-year-old son, Wolf. And then when Wolf was 6 months old, we decided to start trying again. And after 6 months of trying, we moved to IUI. While we were doing the IUI, I had those frozen eggs. We decided to make embryos with those. And we found out we had 4 chromosomally normal embryos. And then I found out that I was pregnant from the IUI. So we didn't need to use those, which would be very fortuitous later. And then I gave birth to my son, Wyatt. And after October 7th, my husband and I decided that we wanted to put another Jewish soul into the world. So we immediately went to surrogacy because I developed a really strange heart problem when I was pregnant with Wyatt. My resting heart rate was 180. My doctor said, not a good idea to get pregnant again. And so we looked into surrogacy, joined with an agency. And after 10 months of waiting, matched with this wonderful, wonderful woman. We transferred our best quality girl embryo. And then unfortunately at 15 weeks, which is the same week that I lost my first pregnancy, she lost this baby. In addition to it being just really heartbreaking. The CCRM, our clinic, wouldn't allow us to continue with her because they couldn't rule out if it had something to do with her uterus. So we had to start the matching process all over. I joined a Colorado surrogacy Facebook group. I told our story in there. I got messages from a bunch of fabulous women, and one of them we just clicked, like really, really clicked, and I knew she was going to pick me. I just knew it, and she did. And we are now 32 weeks. So I will be having my third son in very soon, in 7 weeks, I guess. So that's the journey of how we got to where we are right now. A lot of like really great highs and a lot of pretty sad lows. One thing that I personally did, and I don't think that this is the right choice for everybody, but I want to share why I did it. I told everybody in my life, I mean, like my circle of friends that I love, and my parents and my sister and my in-laws, immediately when I got my pregnancy tests that were positive, and when our surrogates did, because I wanted them around me if something were to go wrong. And twice it did. And it made a really big difference having those people lift me up and take care of me. So I made the decision to talk about it from the beginning. That's not going to be right for everybody. I think it's really about like letting the person who will be carrying the baby make that choice. And especially if it's surrogacy or something where you have to give up so much choice, you have to give up so much of the process, that anything you can support your child or daughter-in-law or whoever's going through it, it helps. My mom, who was so excited for the process, every day when we were trying to match again with the surrogate, every day once we matched with her, and then we were going through the medical screening process until we got that positive pregnancy test, every day she would call and ask for an update. And like, I was already thinking about it all day, every day. I'm already like a very anxious Jewish woman. I didn't need another anxious Jewish woman adding to my anxiety. So I think if there's something my mom could have done a little bit differently, would be let me lead the conversation. Let me talk about it when I need to talk about it, even though she was so entitled to all of the emotions that she was having too. I didn't need to carry that extra anxiety. And then conversely, my mother-in-law, who is a rabbi and is pretty good at giving advice, didn't really. She kind of just said, I'm here if you want to talk, when you want to talk. And we were going to use our fourth best quality embryo, the worst of the bunch, which was another girl, because I already had two boys. And then the day before, I just was in like a complete panic that I was making the wrong choice and like spending all this money and all this time, and like maybe it's a huge mistake. So I called her because she has four sons, and she really helped me to like imagine what my life could be with any of the possible scenarios. And it was so helpful. And I appreciated that it wasn't going to come with any follow-ups that I wasn't ready to talk about. So that's sort of like how I think different parents can handle the situation. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was people asking questions after we lost the baby. I think I just was really honest with people. I didn't want to avoid the topic, and sometimes I would cry when I was talking about it, and sometimes I would feel weird. But people ask because they care, and so I wanted to share that with them. I don't think that's true for everybody. I have friends who really are very, and that was easier for them. So again, there's nothing wrong with asking when you have the information, but be sensitive that the answer could be really different than you expect it to be. And also that the person may not want to talk about it. And it's okay to just ask them, is this something you want to talk about? Should I follow up with you? That could be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Melissa. Again, powerful journey, story, everything. Great advice as well, too. And again, thank you for calling in from Italy. Let me turn our attention now to Carly Sonnenschein, who brings a lot of great experience as an LCSW in Atlanta. Before she talks, let me tell you about Carly. She's a licensed clinical social worker and maternal mental health therapist specializing in the motherhood journey, from pre-pregnancy through the transformative early years. With a bachelor's degree from Indiana University and a Master's of Social Work degree from New York University, she brings both strong clinical foundations and a genuine heart to her Atlanta-based private practice called Shine Counseling. Her work is rooted in a passion for advocacy and a profound respect for the psychological and emotional shifts that define the perinatal experience. She holds a special focus on matrescence, a word that I just learned, the process of becoming a mother, honoring it as one of the most significant identity transformations a person can undergo. Through compassionate, evidence-informed care, she supports clients in navigating the complexities of this chapter, the joy, the grief, the changes, the identity shifts, and everything in between. Carly has been involved with JFF as a proud supporter and facilitates their infant and late-term pregnancy loss support groups, both in Atlanta and virtually nationwide. It's all yours, Carly. Be sure to unmute.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you for having me tonight, and thank you all for being here. So I want to start by saying something I mean sincerely. The fact that you're here truly says everything. In my work, I often have parents or parents-to-be come into my office just behind me, and they're worried. They're worried that they aren't doing the right thing, that they aren't doing enough, that they're going to fall short in the complexities of parenthood and supporting their kids. And every time I reassure them that the worry itself is really the evidence, because you don't worry about things you don't care about. And the fact that you're concerned and that you're willing to be open and do the work tells me that your children are all very lucky to have you. And that's exactly why you're here tonight. So because supporting your child today looks vastly different from anything you might have experienced or needed when you yourselves were building a family and raising them. And the landscape has shifted in ways none of us could have predicted. There's medical advancements that offer both hope and complexity. There's social media that floods us with opinions and comparisons daily. And now there's artificial intelligence shaping our children's research and process and helping them make some of the most vulnerable decisions of their lives. So this is unfamiliar territory for all of us, and that's okay. And my hope is that tonight gives you a map, certainly not a perfect one, but a starting point. And it's for you to love them well in this season, and how to show up for your son or your daughter as they navigate deeply challenging roads to parenthood, how to be the parent they need you to be right now as adults. And so again, I just want to thank you for being here, and thank you for opening the door to learning, to growing, and to finding new ways to connect with your children, with each other, and also with JFF this evening as well. So going through some of the topics tonight that I thought might be most important to the one signing on to all of you is just supporting your child through infertility and family building in general. But first, I wanted to say that we've had Erica and Melissa talk about their personal experiences and what it was like being the patient. And so I'm here to they talked about validation and having feelings of your own, of course, and having that kind of guide your support of them. And so I wanted to start off by saying that, no, you are not the patient in this situation, but you're still hurting. Of course, you're still hurting. And your grief is real. And you might be grieving the timeline you expected, the details you might want to share in your social groups, like Alana was saying, or just feeling helpless watching your child suffer. And these feelings are valid, and they are yours to process privately, like our two panelists had said before. Your feelings are valid, and at the same time, processing them with your loved one going through it may not be what's best in this tumultuous time. But I do want to just acknowledge and validate the feelings that you have. They're so important, and they're all coming from love. And it's just that it's a different place for the patient or your child, the seat that they're in versus the seat of the challenging position of yours and watching that. And again, feeling helpless and how you can fix or alleviate their hurt. So I just wanted to, again, acknowledge that and then talk about grief in general with family building, especially with infertility, because infertility grief or IVF planning, family planning, going through the process, it is grief that can happen, and it happens cyclically. So it's not linear, it is cyclical, and your child might feel hope and then devastation and then excitement and then disappointment, and this might happen month after month, year after year. Each failed attempt at building a family or each cycle or each loss is real, and it might be silent, it might be hard to see from the outside, but typically it is a daily struggle that's there. And it's not very neat. It's a messy experience to go through cyclical grief like that, and have a future that is unknown and a bit dark, not knowing where you're navigating, not knowing what step to take next. And so that's where you have the privilege as their parents to really be that loving light in such darkness. And by being here, you're also allowing yourself to learn ways, hey, what can I do better in supporting them? Because your pain is yours to carry. And because you're such loving parents, you also want to carry your child's pain. And that's what makes you a wonderful parent. But it is their journey, and it isn't yours. And so while you have so many emotions about this, your child can't hold them for you. It's you who is going to be given the privilege and the opportunity to be the container for your child's complicated emotions throughout this process. Because when you are faced with uncertainty and you are stepping into that darkness, to have someone to say it's safe to feel all of the things, all of the range of emotion, you're not going to scare me off, I'm right here to hold them and take your lead, is a huge gift. And I'm sure one that you've already started to give your kids, but something to really hold on to, because it can make such a difference depending on what their needs are. And again, as our panelists had said, sometimes holding that complex grief or excitement or the run of emotions, sometimes holding that for a child, for a person, can be talking about it every day. And sometimes it can be not asking about it. It's just holding that container to say, hey, I love you and I'm here. You tell me what's going to feel best during this time. And then doing that for them. So another topic I wanted to touch on is that perspective shift that we don't always think about when we're trying to support our loved ones and growing a family. Today, it's just different. The landscape your child navigates looks nothing like it did when you were building a family and raising them. There is so much information overload. There are online communities, there's medical complexities, there's so much waiting. There's a lot of financial pressure now because medicine moves faster than our culture, and options exist today that didn't a generation ago, but so does the emotional complexity that comes with them, and so does the financial pressure that comes with them too in order to afford it. And so, of course, that's how JFF, their work is so incredible, but the stress is immense, and it's largely invisible, and it really does impact your daily life as you're going through it in multiple ways. And so there's so much that differentiates the experience that we adult children have today. And so it's important to get curious about that. And instead of applying like, oh, well, when I was, raising you guys or trying to get pregnant with you, I did this. And maybe you should try this, or have you thought about that? Or maybe just relax, or maybe this, or maybe that. And instead, shifting your perspective to from your experience to getting curious about what theirs is in real time. And typically that will allow someone to feel much more seen when you step out of your own perspective and you get curious about another's and say, okay, I'm here and I'm willing to learn about what it's like from your vantage point. Help me understand what it's like going on for you today and where the support best fits in. And then lastly, well, two more topics that I wanted to touch on. And one is the art of showing up as parents, as a loved one, as a support person in their lives. What your child needs from you and what to set aside are really important things to understand. And so maybe it's instead of sharing your pregnancy stories and timelines and, oh, it'll happen, I had this and then I got pregnant right after, or it's going to happen, just relax, stop trying. Maybe instead of that, it's, what do you need from me right now? Maybe it's following their lead on how much to discuss, like one of the panelists talked about. Do you want to talk about this right now? Do you not want to talk about this right now? Maybe it's, instead of announcing their journey, talking about such deeply personal details about their journey to other family members or friends. Maybe it's just acknowledging their loss without trying to fix it and without sharing their story, because it's theirs to share. As much as it feels like it's also ours because they're our children, it really is their story to share or not to share. And so just holding space for them to say, this is okay with me for you to tell so-and-so, and this is not, and then respecting that. And then maybe the art of showing up could look like, for your specific child, which may or may not be helpful, sending a text on hard days of, I'm thinking of you, without any response needed, or just a heart to say, I'm here, I'm right here in your corner. You don't have to say another word. I love you. And then respecting their privacy about treatment details instead of making it kind of, asking daily about it. They will share the details that they want to with you or not, and respecting that. And then celebrating small wins on their terms and not yours. And just really alleviating the pressure to share updates on a timeline, and instead focusing on the small gains that happen, because this process is full of ups and downs. And it's important to acknowledge the silver linings in what could be a very grief-stricken road, and to be there for those moments too. And then I just want to, before I wrap up, I wanted to just share some words that heal versus words that might be a little harmful, because oftentimes when I sit on panels or I'm in groups with people who are wanting to know, what do you say? It's very similar to people experiencing grief, where, if you yourself have experienced grief, as most of us have in one way or another, there's almost never the right thing to say or hear from someone else. It's so hard, as well-intentioned and loving as it can be from the other person. Most of the time it misses or strikes a chord that's not as helpful as we wanted it to be. And so some people ask, well, what do I say then? And I have some examples that I wanted to share with you tonight. So instead of saying things like, well, let's say you have a child who's suffered through a miscarriage, and you say, well, you know what? This was a loss, but at least we know you can get pregnant. Perhaps try saying something like, I'm so sorry. That loss is real and it matters, and I'm here for you. Or this is a popular one. It'll happen when the time is right. It's God's plan. It'll happen when the time is right. Just relax. So instead of saying that, perhaps saying something like, I can only imagine how hard this is for you right now. Period. And then another one that I find is helpful, instead of fixing or trying to make light of it, of saying, well, have you tried this supplement, or have you tried yoga, or have you tried changing your diet? Perhaps it's just, is there anything I can do to make today easier? And then lastly, something that's also, very popular is people trying to say other people's stories. Like, oh, well, my friend had a miscarriage and then she got pregnant the exact next month. Or my friend went through this and she now has 3 kids. The truth is, that's good for that person, but we don't know what this person's story is going to be. We don't know how everything's going to unfold. And so instead, perhaps it's, I don't need to understand it to be here for you. Whatever path you choose, I'm here. So I hope those are helpful. And I want to just close by saying that the best gift you can give is your presence, your patience, your support, and your silence when it's needed. Because sometimes silence and listening to our loved ones is all that really matters, especially when you talk about the topic of grief and loss and uncertainty. So just reminders to hold space, let them feel what they feel without rushing them towards hope or resolution. Follow their lead, ask before sharing, ask before advising, ask before celebrating. And then, of course, love without agenda. Your love for them is not conditional on how or when they grow their family. Your love for them is unconditional, period. And, those are the things that really matter. So I hope that you were able to get a few helpful tips tonight. And I am available for questions. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Carly. I'm so glad we are recording this because there were so many good sound bites and tidbits and things that I'm wanting to use with my children. So thank you. And maybe I'll sign them up for therapy with you. I don't know. But okay. Leah, you've been very patient. Let me introduce, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Leah Roberts. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She's dialing in from Florida. She is a native of South Florida who has brought her passion for reproductive endocrinology and fertility care to Boca Raton. She graduated cum laude from the University of Florida Honors Program, where she completed her Bachelor's of Science in Biology and a minor in English. She received her MD from Florida Atlantic University, where she served as the vice president of her class. She then completed her obstetrics and gynecology residency in Philadelphia at Temple University. After graduation, Dr. Roberts continued at Temple as an associate professor of OBGYN, teaching both residents and medical students until she left to pursue her fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility at Reproductive Medicine Associates in New Jersey. While there, she additionally trained as an embryologist, which provided her with invaluable experience in the clinical laboratory. She has presented her research at several national meetings on topics as varied as ovarian aging and patient engagement with care. She's also been an active participant in lobbying for your reproductive rights and infertility coverage on the state and national levels with Resolve and ACOG. Dr. Roberts is a distinguished clinical affiliate assistant professor of reproductive endocrinology and infertility in the Department of Women's and Children's Health at Florida Atlantic University's Charles E. Schmidt College of Medicine. Now it's your turn to present. Thanks. Dr. Roberts.
My goal over the next few minutes is to walk you through some of the options available for building a family and to offer a little bit of clarity and hope along the way as I share my own personal infertility journey. Infertility affects many individuals and couples, and it's important to remember that there's no single right path to parenthood for any family. I'm going to cover some alternative ways to become pregnant or grow your children's families, including egg freezing, egg donation, surrogacy, and talk a little bit about funding. So let's start with egg freezing. So I know we talked a little bit about this earlier in the evening, but egg freezing, which is also called oocyte cryopreservation, allows individuals to preserve their eggs for future use. This can be really helpful for those who aren't ready to have children now, but want to keep the option open later. It's also sometimes recommended for patients undergoing medical treatments like chemotherapy that can affect fertility, or if there's a known issue with early menopause in anyone's family. Basically, the process is the same as IVF, just up until the sperm portion. So it involves stimulating the ovaries to produce multiple eggs, retrieving them, and then just freezing them for future use. This doesn't guarantee a pregnancy later, but it can significantly increase the chances depending on age and egg quality at the time of freezing. The younger the eggs, the higher our chance of success. But at a certain point, freezing 18-year-olds' eggs doesn't make a lot of sense because they are not likely to use them. So generally, we see this most often in our 30 to 35-year-old population. So let's talk a little bit about egg donors. For individuals or couples whose eggs are not viable due to age, medical conditions, or genetic concerns, using donor eggs is an extremely effective option. Egg donors are typically healthy individuals who go through a ton of screening and testing before they donate. The donated eggs are fertilized with sperm in the lab through IVF, and then the resulting embryo is transferred to the intended parent's uterus. This option has helped many families achieve successful pregnancies, and there are often specific Jewish egg donors whose eggs we can use to ensure any genetic lineage concerns. Another path to consider is surrogacy. That's my personal path. Surrogacy involves another person carrying a pregnancy for the intended parents. So there are two main types: traditional surrogacy, where the surrogate uses her own eggs, and gestational surrogacy, which is what I did, where the egg is created using the intended parent's genetic material, and the surrogate has no genetic link to the baby, but the pregnancy is carried in her uterus. This is a much more commonly used form of surrogacy. This option can be especially helpful for same-sex male couples or for those who cannot safely carry a pregnancy due to medical reasons, like myself. I used a gestational carrier for my second child and hopefully will for my third, although we're not quite there yet. My second is only 11 months old, but that was due to my own pregnancy complications. I know a lot of people tonight have discussed their own fertility journeys, but very briefly, my first pregnancy, my family, my parents and my in-laws and my more extended family found out at about 6 weeks gestation when I had my first hospital admission. It was sort of hard not to share when I had so many complications and I needed the love and support of my family. And the decision was sort of made between myself and my husband to share with my network, because if I had a miscarriage or needed to terminate because of this medical condition, I wanted my support network there with me. But my husband had to answer a lot of the questions because I was really too sick to talk about it much, and he really fielded those questions. Outside our inner circle, that journey was not really discussed. And I think my in-laws and my parents did a really good job of respecting the fact that I didn't really want to share my extensive personal information any further than I needed to. But for my surrogacy journey, I talked extensively about it because I felt like this isn't something that's talked about. A lot of people don't know it's an option. And I actually ended up posting on Instagram that we were looking for someone to help us grow our family. And so, my family was with us through every single moment of that journey. And they've met our gestational carrier several times. She's become a part of our family. I got used to very intrusive questions from the general public. But as painful as it was sometimes for me, I felt like sharing in my specific situation was so important for my community at large and for others to feel comfortable, even if they weren't sharing their story at large, coming to me with questions, concerns, advice, being able to be a support system for my patients, my family, so many of my friends who are going through similar journeys. My in-laws particularly became incredibly skilled at discussing gestational carrier, surrogacy, IVF, and fielding a lot of those questions. So I didn't necessarily have to because they had seen in my first pregnancy how painful it was when people were like, oh, don't even look pregnant. I was like, yes, I know. I'm actively trying not to die as I lose 30 pounds, you know? So they had seen that process and were just such amazing um, champions for my my second pregnancy and they've gone through their own journey with they didn't know if my first pregnancy was going to be successful because my body didn't want to participate the way that we all wanted it to, and so they've been really amazing support system. My parents as well, but my mom has pretty advanced dementia, so not as able to participate in that. Now, especially for gestational carrier and egg donor, one of the biggest concerns a family can have is cost. Fertility treatments and these alternative family building options, even donor sperm, can be expensive. So there are many funding possibilities that help. JFF is a huge part of that, and that's a huge part of their mission to help fund IVF and now soon some gestational carrier journeys. Some insurance plans offer partial or full coverage for fertility treatment, so it's important for them to review their policy carefully. I've had patients who have gotten a part-time job at Starbucks because there are excellent fertility benefits at Starbucks, and there are many other companies that do the same. There are also grants and scholarships offered by other nonprofit organizations that support individuals undergoing fertility treatments, and many clinics will partner with financing options to spread out costs over time. Some employers are also beginning to provide fertility benefits as part of their healthcare packages. So it's worth exploring so many different options for what's available. And certainly egg freezing can be a wonderful Hanukkah gift. I've seen that happen a time or two. So I am super open and happy to answer questions about helping support your family through IVF, surrogacy, egg freezing, egg donation, and answer any questions about my personal journey as well. I am a fully open book and I'm happy to help however I can to anyone.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts, and all of our panelists. You guys, this is like an amazing, as I said repeatedly, I'm so glad it's been recorded because great presentations, all good advice. Now, I have a few questions that we have prepared that I thought might be relevant, but again, this is a webinar for those who are attending. And I forgot to remind you in between presentations to submit your questions via chat via the Q&A so that we can make sure your questions are answered. So put them in Q&A. If there's somebody specific you want them asked of, let me know. But I'm going to start while we're waiting to see if anybody has, because we have a nice group of participants. I'm going to wait to see if anybody has any questions, but I'll start with Erica. And some of this we maybe have covered, but and I know Carly, you gave a lot of really great advice, but I do want to hear once again, repetition is really great on these topics. So what can, parents say to friends who don't understand why their child, their, whomever in their life wants to be a single mom by choice? And you kind of touched upon that, but what can, friends who are kind of intrusive, what can the parents say to them? Like, why is your daughter or daughter-in-law, it wouldn't be daughter-in-law, but daughter doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about this like after, we had talked about this being a potential question. And to me, the important thing is well, kind of twofold. One is you can be plain and simple and honest. Um, my daughter always wanted to be a mother and decided to move forward with a plan to conceive. We're all really excited. That's all that has to be said. You don't have to give any more details. You don't have to justify it. The other piece that I think comes to mind for me is the privacy aspect of not sharing your child's story unless you ask them what they're comfortable with you sharing. So making sure you aren't just automatically spilling everything your child has told you without saying, hey, do you mind if I share this with my friends? Or what would you prefer that I share with my friends? And I think that like the combination of those two, like kind of simple and honest, and then respecting the child's privacy and asking your child what you would want shared are the things that stand out to me. I think in general, normalizing that there's many ways to build a family. I just heard Dr. Roberts start her part of the presentation saying that, and I say that a lot in my work that I do professionally, and like normalizing that there's many ways to build a family, and solo parents by choice are one of the many ways to build a family. But I think if you normalize that, there's no need to over explain it. You just sort of say like, this is the choice my child is making, and we're all really excited, kind of, and you don't need to go much further than that. There's no shame in it. There's no it's just one way of many to build a family.
Well, and I'm going to ask Melissa, but it also may be relevant to you, Erica, or to anybody on this call. But Melissa, how did you explain, or how do, since we have intended grandparents or hopeful parents, maybe regular grandparents on the call, but how do you explain like why you didn't adopt versus surrogacy? I don't know if you get asked that or if your parents get asked that. I'm assuming that Erica also shaking her head. So why don't we start with you, Melissa, and then we'll toss the mic to Erica.
I think that question implies that like anyone can just like snap their fingers and adopt, which is like very not the case. And then also there's been a lot of complicated issues in adoption in my husband's family, so he felt like that wasn't the right decision for us. And I also think that's like a weird question to ask people. E- everyone has like so much of a really personal and sometimes very sad, but definitely very emotional reason that they came to this thing. And to act like they could have just so easily made a different decision is like a little bit insulting. And yeah.
So if people ask a grandparent that, what would you suggest that they say? If somebody says, well, why didn't Melissa just adopt? Why is she doing the whole surrogacy thing? What would you advise?
I would ask my mom to say one or both of um, that was the surrogacy was the best decision for Melissa and Joe and for the family that they wanted to create. And also, adoption is not something that is available to everybody
Okay,
easily.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Erica, did you want to add to that?
I mean, I think I feel very similarly. Like I get asked it a lot. I think because I chose to get pregnant as a solo person as opposed to adopting as a solo person. Also, I worked in adoption for the first, well, I'm still working in adoption. So for 20 years of my life, I've worked in adoption. So the natural question is like, why would you not choose adoption? Well, the reality is I know too much. Like it is not easy to adopt. And there's a lot of trauma in adoption that it's hard with a lot of different types of adoption. And it wasn't the right choice for me. But the other thing was I really wanted to be pregnant. And I sort of felt that um, why should I, just because I'm doing this solo, why should I not be pregnant? Also, there's a financial piece that's in consideration. It is a lot more economical to get pregnant via IUI with a sperm donor than it is to adopt a newborn. Like huge cost difference between adoption of a newborn and if you're able to get pregnant by IUI. Once you get into IVF, it gets a little closing the gap a little bit. But so that's another reason. But in terms of what someone I think could say, if they're asked that as a intended grandparent, I think very much like Melissa said, like that my child decided that was like the best path to parenthood for them. Again, plain and simple, no need to sort of excuse it away or share more than needed.
Okay, good. Thank you both. Carly, someone submitted a question that said, can you make recommendations for online support groups or Facebook groups for grandparents looking for support related to my grief over the situation? And again, I don't know if this is an intended grandparent or a parent attending, but what would you suggest? Oh, okay. Let me add to this, by the way. This is added by this person. Prior to getting professional assistance, I clearly made several mistakes in supporting our daughter through her IVF journey with her husband. What's the best way to say a little different. Say, I'm sorry since I probably asked too many questions and didn't understand the stress and grief she and my son-in-law were experiencing. So let's start with that. Prior to getting professional assistance, I made a few mistakes in supporting our daughter through her IVF journey with her husband. What's the best way to say she's sorry? And then if you have a few recommendations for support groups, that would be helpful.
I would be happy to look up some resources and vet them a little bit. I haven't had specific resources for support groups that are online or on Facebook, but I can certainly suggest some and find a way to get those to you. But as far as the apology, there's a really beautiful thing in parenthood that I'm learning as a mom of three, that we are going to make mistakes. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. And hindsight is always 2020. We live and we learn and we look back and say, I could have done things differently, or I'm really sorry for doing this a certain way. And sometimes people feel like it's just too late to apologize. And the beautiful thing about parenthood is it's really never too late to repair. So, how to say you're sorry? I think as an apology is very vulnerable, and it should be authentically worded by you. And it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's the fact that it's coming from you is such a beautiful repair. And in simple words, I'm sorry. I think in your question was also your answer. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you during that time the way I could see I could have been. And I can't imagine how any child wouldn't be so appreciative of that, no matter the time that's lapsed.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Roberts, I'm going to go back to surrogacy for a second. How did you, there's really two questions on that. How did you begin the surrogacy journey, and what's the role, do you think, of a grandparent in the surrogacy journey? I know Melissa talked about her parents being very supportive and open, but I'm wondering those two questions, and Melissa, feel free to add. How do you begin the surrogacy journey if it's not, too complicated to answer this? And then what's the role of the parent during that process?
So some of it kind of depends on where you're coming at it from. Like, let's say you know that you cannot carry a pregnancy for medical indication, like a cardiac condition or et cetera. The first step really is to go through IVF and make your embryos. Generally, finding a gestational carrier takes a long time. At minimum, it takes 6 to 8 months. So usually in tandem, you're also getting involved with an agency to help find that gestational carrier kind of as you're making your embryos. It's hard because you want to make sure you can make embryos before you start paying for an agency, but usually people go through an agency in order to find their gestational carrier. Then you go through, once they find a gestational carrier, there's legal, you have to buy the insurance, you have to set up an escrow account. It's very complicated. It takes like a whole project management team, which is why most people will use an agency. And I do recommend using an agency. They can also just kind of smooth your journey through the entire process. From the perspective of supporting, that's so hard. I mean, it's the same as supporting any IVF journey, I think, or any IUI, any infertility journey whatsoever. And a lot of it, I talk a lot to partners about this, but I think that parents can kind of be the same way, as like mirroring what they're saying. So if they say, this sucks, you can say, this is so hard, this sucks. It's okay to be pissed or upset with them. If they say, I'm just very confident that this is God's plan and God's will, and it will come when it will come, you mirror that back to you. Like, get on their level, say what they're saying, and try to be, parallel to them, because sometimes the biggest disagreements I see with couples are that they're just on two different journeys, two different paths. And really, it's sort of like any grief. If you have a child that loses their parents. You, as a part of their circle, has a right to grieve that death, but also needs to be there for that child first. If you are further out of the circle, then the next, the cousins can grieve to you and so on and so forth. So just like you can grieve to your extended circle of the loss that you're feeling, you don't want to put that on the inner circle of the people going through it. You want to have the support system, your therapist, or you don't want to make your child your therapist. You want to go to your therapist and let yourself be the receptive party of that therapy. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of what I like to talk about. And I feel like my family did a really good job of that. I'm sure my parents were, grieving the not having the joy of that pregnancy with me when I was so sick, but they did a really good job of supporting me, and whatever grief they had, they talked to my sister about, or my brother about, or people who were kind of further outside the circle and could be supportive for them rather than me having to parent them or support them.
I mean, that's really important also, the parenting them. And I think Carly touched upon that in terms of the tips that you gave us. That's great, Dr. Roberts. Melissa, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, also, I loved what you said, Dr. Roberts. I joined like every Facebook, whatever group I could find for intended parents to see what people were talking about, to see the questions they were asking. This really wonderful former surrogate, she compiled a list of like every question you would want to know from an agency and from a potential match. And I kept that on me at all times. So I was like practice before like my first match meeting. So I got comfortable asking those questions. Every friend I had, I asked, like, do you know anyone who went through surrogacy? My mom also did the same. And so she was able to connect me with some of her friends, kids who had gone through it. And a couple of my friends were able to connect me. And I learned a lot. And I probably avoided some of the mistakes that these people had made because they were so generous in sharing with me. So extending your circle and really researching and really getting as much information as possible.
Great. Anybody else, or should we go on to another question? I don't want to exclude. So we have a question about a child, and I don't know who wants to answer this. My child is going through IVF due to genetic testing. I respect her privacy, but would like to better understand the process she is going through. What is the best way to learn about the different procedures she and her husband are navigating? Carly, you want to start?
Sure. So some bit I left off is that our story and family planning involved that and genetic testing. And rare genetic disorders can really find their way in a lot of the family planning that we're discussing today. And it is very sensitive and uncertain. And if your child is a very private person, I think I would start with asking them, can I learn with you? And would you be comfortable with that? Or like, are you comfortable with sharing what these procedures are, or, maybe after a doctor's appointment, if you want to share some information, if it would be helpful. And if they're a very private person, then, perhaps researching on your own, calling Dr. Roberts. And
a resource, resolve.org has like tons of really good resources of if you go to resolve and then you go to learn, there's family building options, and they have a great genetic testing and screening, IVF, all the steps, videos, frequently asked questions, like just if you're just wanting to learn about the process rather than your child's like specific details of their journey, Resolve is a great resource for that.
Okay, resolve.org, resolve.org. Great. So kind of in line with the privacy piece, there continuing on in sort of another question, this person wants to know that, let me just try to look at this. They get information that their daughter and son-in-law want to share with her, but they're concerned that she will only share if there is a pregnancy and will try to manage a loss without support of the parents. Any advice on on how to maybe, and it again tags into a lot of what you all have said, but let's repeat any advice to maybe figure out a way to support if there is a loss, or should she even, if without her daughter's interest in their support. So I don't know, you guys are all shaking your head. Who wants to jump in on this one?
I'll say really quickly, if that's really what your daughter wants, you, you got to let her have it. And I know that probably sounds like so hard. I'm just thinking about my sons, like when they're hurt, I want to run over and fix everything. And my husband's like, but maybe that wasn't what they needed. And it's hard to think about because they are your heart. But it has to be about what they are going through. And, you can upfront say, like, anytime you want to talk, whether it's good news or bad news, I'm here for you. And then let them make the choice.
It looks like everybody. Erica, it looks like you also wanted to. Thank you, Melissa. Very, very good. Yeah.
So I think that I was going to say very similarly that if your child is choosing to keep it private, then that does need to be respected because there's probably a reason behind their choice and how they're handling everything. But also, I don't think it can be ruled out that the child won't share a loss. I think that with the clients I've worked with professionally, and I'm crossing boundary here a little bit because I know I'm not here as the counselor, I'm here as a solo parent by choice. But with the clients I've worked with professionally, there have been quite a few of them that have not shared trying to conceive, but have shared with their family when a loss has occurred. I'm not saying it will, but I'm also saying I don't think that one necessarily indicates the other, that just because they don't want the grandparents going through the ups and downs of the trying to conceive, and this month worked and this month didn't work and this month didn't work, and it doesn't mean that if there's a significant loss where they need support, they're not going to reach out. And the other thing I think is going back to something Carly said when she was talking, in that, like, the best I think you can do as a parent when a child isn't giving that information is just that I'm thinking of you, right? Like, if there's anything at all you need, or I'm here for you, I'm here to talk, like, but not, you can't do much more, unfortunately. And I also agree with what Melissa said. I being a parent now, it would be very hard to know your child is going through something and that they may not be sharing that with you. So you have to walk that fine line of coping with your own emotions and how you can cope with your own emotions while not crossing that boundary, and still supporting them in their wishes.
Carly, thank you, Erica. Carly or Leah, anything else you want to add to that?
Just that you have to respect kind of their desires. I have a family member who did not feel comfortable sharing with her parents, about her loss because she didn't want to deal with the emotions of their loss. And she didn't want to put that on them. And that's, that was her decision. And I think you have to respect how they're going to process things.
One thing more to add is to just kind of bring it back full circle to the person who's typing the question and to everyone else who's watching, which is, again, your pain watching this process is also important and valid. And so what is equally as important as respecting the boundaries that your child is placing of whether they are or are not going to share something with you, are your feelings about that boundary. And so if you're feeling a certain way, helpless or upset or angry or confused, you are also able to get curious and process your own emotions going through that, so that you can kind of regain some of that composure and say, like, okay, well, let me go talk about it because my feelings are the only ones I can really try to regulate and manage during this time, because there's a wall, being closed off in trying to help my child. So I'm going to focus on myself so that they can know that I'm going to be a constant source of support when and if they come to me, and how I'm going to be able to manage if they don't. And so reminding, it's also a reminder, yes, of course, you have to follow their lead. You really shouldn't push and all of these things, but you should also honor your feelings about it. and work on soothing yourself during this time if you're not getting the information that may soothe you instead.
This was a question that came up in the last session that we did. It's a little one-off, but it talked about how do you support a child who's going through the infertility journey or waiting for, from a surrogacy standpoint or just the different processes. And the child says to you, your child, as the grandparent says, or the parent, I don't really want to go to my sister's son's birthday party or the shower. Or, and it's not been a topic that we talked about directly today, but I know it's one that, as a grandparent that you might have to contend with within the dynamics of your family and every sibling, every child's process of getting pregnant, having kids, losing kids, IVF, no IVF. What kind of advice do you have in terms of that kind of support from a grandparent standpoint within the context of their own children and family, in-laws, etc.? Anybody? I'll just open it up.
I think that's a really hard one size fits all answer, right?
Yeah.
Like if I was telling my mom I'm feeling sad and a little apprehensive about going to one of my friends' baby showers, it's different than saying like I'm not going to my sister's baby shower, your other daughter, right? Like there's a lot of nuance there. If it's not your other daughter, I think just asking like, how are you feeling? Like what's making you feel sad? Like you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, and you should do things that make you feel good and taken care of. But yeah, I mean, it could be a lot more complicated than that. And I think creating a space where they can share with you is what is the best that you can do, and not really not try to say like just put on a brave face and go, even if that is what you're thinking, because they can't, otherwise they would have.
Okay, good. Thank you, Melissa. Erica.
So I also think it's important as the parent to not be in the middle of two children. And that's what happens sometimes in these cases. You have the child that is going through infertility that's saying that they don't want to go to this event. And you've got the child that's having the event that is saying they want the sibling there, or you've had one child that just had a loss and another child just found out they're pregnant. I mean, this happens in a lot of the families I work with. And I think what's important is I always try to encourage that it's really hard to be in the middle and you want to be there for both your children, but also they need to communicate to each other and say like, listen, I can't come to this because I'm really struggling right now and I'm so sorry, rather than putting that parent in the middle of the two kids, because that's just really hard. So
Yeah.
I would say encouraging your kids to speak to each other and share those hard truths, because that's what it is. It's a hard truth and a hard reality of this is what I'm going through, and therefore I may not be able to be here for you right now in the way that I would like to be.
Excellent. And by the way, I just want to say I have one or two other questions for the panelists, but if anybody on the call, on the webinar, wants to post their question, we still have time. So if you have a burning question, I know, now's the time to ask it. But yeah, I have kind of like a broad brush question, which is kind of a funny one, but I said, does anybody here have a question that wasn't asked, that you're like, wait a second, this is a question that I think either I can answer, or as a panelist, I'd like to ask one of the other panelists. Because sometimes during the presentations, I heard so many great comments and thought, wow, I wonder if anybody wants to ask each other, panelist to panelist question, or of themselves. Hey, I forgot to say this, or here, listening made me wonder the following. I'll just kind of open it up to kind of a broad brush question. So nothing's coming up. That's okay. So I would say in terms of an overarching, Erica and Carly, you both do therapy, it sounds like. And you have like your 5 pointers, Carly, but what are, what do you think is a general thing during the therapy that comes up that might be valuable? Anything else that has been left unsaid? Or, I think a theme for me that I took away from is I'm a fixer, so I have to stop fixing. Is there any kind of like power, like if you could summarize, sort of distill down, what's a learning or an insight that you might give to the attendees in tonight's session or those who are listening to the recording? And Leah and Melissa, I'm going to come to you as well. A summary statement of sorts. Carly.
Um, a summary statement.
Or just a general pattern. Are you seeing with some
Yeah,
of your clients, right? Because as I said, I'm a fixer and that resonated with me. Do you see generally in your practice, so yeah, you
I
got it.
do. I do. So, I have several clients in the past who has actually brought in a parent or parents to this space to have conversations about ways that they can feel more supported, and have that space to kind of have me as the facilitator or the translator and the supporter, and to have it be a productive conversation moving forward as they continue on with their trials and joys and hardships of building a family, and growing family, or what have you. So a theme that I notice a lot with the dynamics that come and sit on the couch behind me, is that a client will come in and say, um, my parent is so well-meaning, they love me so much, but they're just projecting like all of the feelings and all of their experiences instead of really seeing me and trying to understand like what it actually is I need versus what they think I need. And so that's a theme that I see often. And it's a beautiful thing to watch when that wall kind of gets broken down and communication can pass safely from one party to the next, to say, this is what I'm trying to do because it worked for me and my mom did it for me. And, this is something that means something to me because X, Y, or Z. And I just think it's going to help you. And then the adult child saying like, I understand that, but it's not helping. Actually, this is what I need. And then having the space and the vulnerability to say, regardless, I love you. I know it's well intentioned, but like it's not working for me. Instead, I could really use this. And then getting curious and having that open conversation creates a connection that creates also just a lot more confident interaction and conversation in navigating this really windy road. And so if they're able to really kind of strip down those fears or that lack of vulnerability to say like, okay, this is what I'm trying to give you, trust me, I know it's best for you, and then I know, thank you, I love you, but this is actually what I need, can you do this for me? And then having a parent and a child come together to try something new and walk the same path, moving forward, is definitely something I have seen here in my practice. And it requires communication, much like, a parent can come and say, oh, I'm really struggling with how to support my child. It's this, that, and the other thing. The child can say, I'm really struggling trying to receive support from my parent, even though I know they love me, it's really not working. And they're going outward in the relationship instead of inward towards each other, towards connection, communication, and vulnerability. And so that's a common theme that I see, is that there's so much good intention and love, but they're just missing the mark, and all they really need to do is come together to overcome that.
Okay, good.
Hope that
Thank
was
you.
a good
We're going to close in 1 second, but Dr. Roberts, I have a really a question. Maybe it's sort of personal, but I have a pregnant daughter who has some issues, and I was talking to her mother-in-law today, and she said, I think we should go to the next. One of us should be there at the next ultrasound appointment or the perinatal appointment. And how do you have, in terms of medically or even not medically, again, social work kind of question, how do you deal with either having parents or in-laws in with, exams or ultrasounds or those kinds of things? So that's one question. And then the second question I'll open up and we can even close with this is how do you deal with, multiple sets of parents trying to support their kids that maybe aren't even aligned? So the first one is kind of a little bit medical, and the other one is just sort of an alignment with different, in-law to in-law.
Absolutely. So I think it really depends on how it's approached. So, a huge portion of the time, like a lot more than you would expect, I will have moms come in with their kids. It happens frequently, especially if a partner cannot come. So if the kid would be coming alone, a lot of times we'll have mom step in. Happens incredibly frequently, especially for ultrasounds and for procedures if the partner cannot come because it happens in the middle of the day. Sometimes that can be really difficult. Egg freezing, universally, people bring a friend or their mom. Definitely, I think if your child is interested in egg freezing and expresses that to you, be like, I'll come with you. Do you need an extra set of hands? Do you need someone to drive you? Like that is somewhere that I think that parents can really shine is being participating in egg freezing. Ultrasounds a ton, especially like the first ultrasound, they'll come with their partner. The second, they'll come with their mom or their mother-in-law. Like that's a really beautiful thing. They'll FaceTime their mom or their mother-in-law. Where I have had some issues is I've had a couple consults where there's like 6 people in the room with me, and that's just too much. So like if partner and one mom wants to come, great. 3 people in the room, fine. I've definitely had some consults where like partner, mom, dad, in-law, father-in-law, we're all there. And then like there are people running interference of like, what can you say in front of what person? Like it has to be all people I can talk freely in front of, especially for that initial consult. I recently had one where like I got called by the husband ahead of time that was like, we don't want them to know X, Y, or Z. And I was like, we really need to have a separate consult with them because I can't have my first consult with you guys not be able to talk about 75% of what we need to be talking about today. Like that doesn't jive with what
Right.
I need to be able to treat you. And that is open and honest communication versus like an ultrasound. Like usually I'm not talking about their like abortion history or their sex life or that kind of stuff. So it's not, those like first OB ultrasounds are like really joyous. And a lot of times like that's, you want to bring both mom and mother-in-law to your OB ultrasound. Like that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's really wonderful and lovely. And I think if that's what the patient wants, like I think as a obstetrician, I was always very open to that. And I'm always open to that as an REI. I'm sorry, you asked a second question.
Well, the second question, and I can give that to Melissa and or Erica, and then we're going to have Allison close us out. But is the in-law like a disconnect between the mother and the mother-in-law wanting to approach the fertility journey, the surrogacy, the single mom by choice? I mean, they all have different, and again, it probably goes back to what Carly has said and Erica, but have you either had that or do you have any thoughts on maybe a disparate or disconnect between mother-in-law and the person going through whatever journey it is they're going? Either how do you handle that, or what advice do you have if that scenario might exist, or even if it didn't for you all, do you have any thoughts on that?
One thing that's like kind of interesting about my personal journey, I think I said earlier that my mom has some pretty advanced dementia. I'm really close to one of my aunts. She adopted a child, and it was very hard for her when I was going through surrogacy for her to be there for me because she was incredibly disappointed that I wasn't adopting. And like that was hard for me that she didn't really approve of what I was doing. And she was sort of like a maternal figure. And I really turned to my mother-in-law in that time. And my mother-in-law kind of had to talk to my aunt and be like, navigating some of that stuff. So a lot of it's just like open, honest communication between everyone. And my aunt just being like, I can't be here for you for this. And like, that's okay. Like if you as the mother or the mother-in-law like can't participate in that way and be productive, then like that's okay. You can express that. Like you're going through your own feelings of grief. You're allowed to not agree with what they're doing, and that's okay.
Excellent. Melissa, did you want to add to that or close us out with anything else?
As a person who's about to have her third son, I hope I take this advice someday. But even if it's your daughter-in-law and she has a mom that she wants in the room, it might feel hurtful because it's as much your grandparent too. When it's just different. It's just different. Like I love my mother-in-law. There was no way I wanted her in the delivery room with all just me naked, and I don't know, it just like felt weird. But I had my mom there, and it was in no way a response to how I feel about her or how much I want her to be in my children's life. It was just about like what made me comfortable in the moment. And I'm sure that when it's my turn, I'm going to feel left out, but I will, but that's
Well,
unfortunately the way it is.
did you say something to your mother-in-law in advance, or did your mother say anything to the mother-in-law about the situation? Just out of curiosity.
I would say neither my mother or mother-in-law are amazing communicators. So I just sort of would like watch things unfold, and my husband and I would talk about like when should we say something to them, and when should we just like let it roll off our shoulders and move on because it's a moment in time.
Okay. All right. Well, anybody feel like they haven't said their last piece before we close this out? I don't want to shut down. All right. Well, Allison, it's your turn to take us home. How's that? Thank you, panelists, from my heart as well. Oh, oh, Allison, need to unmute.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Well, thank you to everybody again. We are so glad that you joined us tonight. After creating Legacy of Love over a year ago, or almost a year ago, we are overwhelmingly proud of the impact we've made together. Thank you again to the Jewish Grandparents Network. Definitely check them out online. They are a great supporter and friend of Legacy of Love. And of course, thank you to Shelley Gaines, our fabulous moderator, along with our panel, Melissa, Erica, Carly, and Dr. Roberts, for allowing us to listen and speak openly about being a hopeful grandparent. Your heartfelt stories and expertise are invaluable. As a reminder, I will be sending you the recording along with notes with information discussed and learned this evening, in addition to some helpful resources. Carly, I'd love for you to send me whatever you have, and I will get them out to everybody. And in closing, if you're feeling inspired tonight, please consider supporting JFF via the link that is being shared in the chat, which will also be in tomorrow's email. Every gift helps us stay sustainable and grow our impact. And we couldn't do this without you. So thank you for helping us build a lasting legacy of love. Thank you again.